to make sure all of these guests who have their presentation get their chance for time, and also that you get your chance to ask questions as this goes along. And so we are happy to take your questions. We invite you to write questions on cards if you hear something from one of the presenters, and then after all of the presenters are finished, we'll have time and answer as many questions as time allows. So this is a chance to put some of the pieces together about what's been going on in this Two Rivers Lake and Ditch 28 area. And you'll receive information about some of the issues, some of these organizations and resource people involved, including those you've just met, some potential options for water management, and what landowners can do as you are part of this informational meeting tonight. In order for this to be a productive and engaging meeting, just a handful of expectations. We have done planning for this and ask that you respect the agenda. We're trying to be very timely and cover a lot in 90 minutes. And so that's 60 minutes for the information sharing and 20 minutes for question and answer. And the other 10 goes for kind of this overview of what you can anticipate from the session tonight. We have great acoustics in this room, and we are going to use the microphone so that you're able to hear, but we ask you to keep the side conversations or one-on-ones down while the speakers are relaying their information. We will again have the question and answer time, and we invite turn taking then and invite you to keep your questions brief, and we will have resource people who are able to stick around afterwards. If you write your question on a card and or afterward, it'll be very helpful if you direct it to an agency or a person. So if you have a question for Dan or Crystal the hydrologist or Kurt the attorney, just put their name on your card and that will move that along. And finally, we want to keep it civil tonight. Holdingford's a beautiful town and beautiful area, and so focusing on the issues, this is a very important issue, and it's time to share information, and that's what we're here to do tonight. So with that, also continuing in the introduction is Scott Marlin from the Surveyor's Office.
Thank you, Donna. One of the things that I want to do is just to give you some general information about where we're at, where County Ditch 28 is, Two Rivers Lake, and how it fits in with the watershed district. So the watershed district that we're looking at, I'm going to start with the larger part, is South Two River Watershed District, which, if I can get my pointer going here, doesn't look like it's going to work. So the watershed district is roughly from south of Albany, south of I-94. It's going to run all the way up to north of Holdingford, and it ultimately empties out into the Mississippi River. I-94 does bisect the southern portion of this watershed district. This causes some unique drainage issues. And the South Two River flows from the southwest down here to the northeast. The South Two River is 29.3 miles long, and in this watershed we have 116 miles of additional streams and public ditches. So that's a lot of water that we've got moving. Additionally, there's many more miles of private ditching. Private ditching is an additional issue and problem that we have with the watershed. Two Rivers Lake. Two Rivers Lake is here, and Two Rivers Lake is impaired. Has a couple of issues that we're going to be talking about and dealing with. One, it's impaired for nutrients. And Phil, I think, from PCA is going to be talking about that a little bit. And the other issue that we're dealing with tonight is some of the lakeshore owners are dealing with flooding and high water issues, sustained water issues. County Ditch 28 County Ditch 28 runs roughly from Quaker Road, which is just to the northeast of Albany, and it ends in Holdingford at County Road 17. It was established around 1906 for agricultural and drainage purposes from the channel of the South Two River. Flows from, let's see, I got that detail. We have about 234 parcels in the benefited acreage of this ditch system. And with a county ditch system, only those folks that live within the benefited acreage of that ditch system can pay for any maintenance or any work that's done within the ditch system. That doesn't come out of any of our ad valorem tax dollars. Two Rivers Lake has 127 parcels on the lake, and 65 of those parcels are within the benefited acreage. So everyone that lives on Two Rivers Lake is not within the benefited acreage of County Ditch 28. So that's the information I guess that I have to set up what our other speakers are going to be doing tonight and talking about. And I think we're going to turn over to Dan.
And that's a lot of information, and we anticipate some of you would like to study it up a little bit more and not be quite so busy taking notes. So that will be available on the county website tomorrow, and it also would be available by PowerPoint if you want an attachment sent to you through email so that you could see all of the information tonight. And then the video from tonight will be available on YouTube. So, and if there's another way that you'd like to get the information in order to listen instead of take notes, you can talk to Roxanne and she'll make that happen. So we got our tech helper on the laser pointer. Up next is Department of Natural Resources, our area manager, Dan Lace, and Crystal Payment, the hydrologist, and they have another hydrologist here also. Dan.
Thank you, and good evening. I've spent 23 years with the Department of Natural Resources. Prior to my stint as a district manager, I spent 20 years as a hydrologist in the Stearns County area. You'll maybe want to refer to some of the glossary of terms in your handouts. I'm going to focus on one of the terms in there is what's called the ordinary high water level, and there's a definition of that as well. This just shows kind of a graphical depiction. And, it's the OHW is the highest water level which has been maintained for a sufficient period of time to leave evidence on the landscape. Okay, and this is also what the DNR considers for its jurisdiction. Anything located below that elevation is considered to be part of the lake bed, and that's what's regulated by the DNR. That's where your setbacks are measured from. If you build a new house, put in a new septic system, it's from that elevation landward that would be measured from. What an OHW is not, okay? It's not a runout. It's not a normal water level or average water level. It's also not an extreme high flood level, okay? It's not an arbitrary number that is just plucked out of the air. It's based on very scientific information, and it's determined via a scientific survey. I won't go into those details, but if somebody has questions afterward, I'd be happy to answer those. What I want, a key take-home here, though, is the ordinary high water level. It's exactly that. It is in response to a lake, its watershed and precipitation. Water levels will bounce to that ordinary high water level on a fairly routine basis. On average, I would say every 2 to 5 years, you will see lake levels, whether we're talking Two Rivers Lake, Big Spunk Lake, Pelican Lake, or Mille Lacs Lake. They will routinely be at or above their OHW, ordinary high water elevations. And that's just that because that's part of the lake bed, okay? So you get above that ordinary high water level, you start to approach lake levels that would be more consistent with flooding or extreme high water events. I'm going to just kind of skip over these. They're in your glossary of terms, but you'll probably hear those mentioned tonight. Okay, I just want to touch on precipitation. Average annual precipitation in the state of Minnesota is roughly 25 inches a year. Stearns County's average annual precipitation is a little bit above that, about 28 inches. And the last bullet there, it talks about since 1980 to present, 84% of the annual precipitation at the gauge closest to Two Rivers Lake has been 84% of the time has exceeded that state average. So average annual precipitation has been relatively high over that period of record. I do want to mention there's another key point, that third bullet, the watershed to lake ratio. That's a very important number to keep in mind. It takes the size of the watershed, which is 32,000 acres. That's what really is draining in above the point at which the lake runs out, where water leaves the lake, basically by your carp trap. That's where the run out is. Everything upstream of that, 32,000 acres is draining in. The size of Two Rivers Lake is about 756 acres. So extremely large watershed to lake ratio. And I'll talk more about that. This slide here just depicts water levels that have been collected primarily since 1980. Most recently, our water levels have been from 2011. We don't have an active gauge reader, so if somebody is interested in reading lake levels, come and see Nikki or myself, Crystal, afterwards. We'd be very interested in that. A couple of key points on this slide. Let's see if I can get my pointer. Right here is the runout elevation where water would leave the lake, and you can see there's been a few elevations at that point. The red line here, that's that ordinary high water level that I was talking about, okay? Normal fluctuation range, up to that ordinary high or even above. This line right here is approximately the average water level over that period of record. This slide here just shows an aerial photo view of what some of those elevations really look like on the ground. Right here, this outline here in purple as it kind of appears, that's basically where your runout elevation would be on Two Rivers Lake. This is your outlet. Okay, the green line, or that roughly right here, that's that ordinary high water level. That's where that would look like on the landscape. And then the shaded area here, out to this line here, that's the floodplain, the 100-year, 1% chance floodplain. Some of the SWCD staff actually provided some of the information here to give you an idea of the surface water fluctuation. We pulled at a couple of lakes in the vicinity here. Two Rivers Lake, obviously, from that runout, that low elevation all the way to the record high, 7.5 feet. Some of the other lakes in the area, Pelican Lake has a smaller ratio of 3 feet. Big Spunk, Big Watab in the neighborhood of 2. Key point to make here, though, is look at that. Remember that watershed to lake size that I referenced? How Two Rivers was approximately 43 to 1. You can see these other lakes like Pelican, 7 to 1. Big Spunk has a higher watershed ratio, up about 34 to 1, and Big Watab about 8 to 1. Commissioner Mergen asked me, actually, Dan, if you looked at all the lakes in Minnesota, what would you see would be a typical range of that watershed to lake size? I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I would say it's more in the order of this 8 to 1, 7 to 1, 10 to 1 range. There are a few systems, Two Rivers is one of them, where you have a much higher watershed ratio. This is a photo. Nikki Blake Bradley took this photo here on October 3rd. Just to give you some perspective, as residents on the lake very well know what these water levels look like, but we're just trying to put that into perspective. The water level on October 3rd, was 1130.3, which is actually below the average water level. This flag represents at the base, the land elevation roughly at this flag is where the ordinary high water level would be. It's about 3 feet of difference from that water level to the ordinary high. I suspect this is a pretty typical situation that you see on Two Rivers Lake. Although there's grass and stuff growing here, this is all lake bed. Okay, that's what would be considered part of the lake. Now, you as landowners, you get to use that lake when the lake is low, but when it's high, the lake is basically bouncing back up within its normal range. This is just another perspective of looking at where that OHW lies on the landscape. One of the things we did is we looked at the period of record and wanted to just see if we could see any trends, in 10-year blocks. From 1980 to 1989, we looked to see what that average water level did. We've got that 30-year record of average water levels. We're curious to see what it did in that 10-year period. The average was 1130.85 in that first 10 years. From 1990 to 1999, it was 1131.03. Not very much difference there. And then looking back from 2000 to 2009, 1130.75. So there's really very little fluctuation in that average water level. It's very consistent. So there wasn't a big trend difference there. As something changed in the last 10 years or the last 5 years. We tried to pick that up, and that was what the data basically was an expression of. Okay, and just putting that into perspective again, of that entire period of record, roughly over 1,000 lake level readings, about 39 of those readings, or those spikes that you see, were above average, the average water level. Okay? About 10 times was above the OHW. So in roughly that 30 years, about every 3 years or so, you're seeing that water level naturally fluctuate up to and beyond that ordinary high water level. Now, a couple of those events were pretty extreme. They're starting to get up more in flood range. And then that elevation 1136.7, that's that 1% chance flood elevation. Okay, just briefly, what are some of the things that might be going on in the watershed that could affect water levels? Landscape and hydrology changes. We've seen significant changes since, pre-settlement times. Agricultural changes, lakeshore development, residential development, urban development. All affects how water moves off the land, commonly altered hydrology. Faster moving water has a greater potential to carry sediments and nutrients. Just real quickly, these are some slides, 1938 to 2010. Just shows some of the difference in residential development. Not much development back in 38 compared to 2010 here, 150 plus homes. There's some changes that are right on the lake. Pre-settlement vegetation cover type. 77% of that landscape was in hardwood. Aspen birch forest, 21% roughly wetlands, 2% lakes. If we look to what we have now, 85% of that watershed is tied to agriculture. Almost 55% being cropland. So a lot of that topography and landscape has changed, all of which changes how fast or slow, the water infiltrates into the ground and runs off into the system, into the watershed, to the lake. All of that has a bearing on water level fluctuation. Before I introduce the next speaker or have Crystal come up to talk about the hydraulics of the outlet, we're mentioning that because we know there's been some specific concern on the outlet on County Ditch 28. There's been some reference to, some blockage in the channel. So one of the things the DNR did is we specifically did some more field work to improve some of the data that was already collected when the flood insurance study was redone. We did some intensive field work, collected more field survey data to try to build and inform our model. We're using a state-of-the-art hydraulic model that basically looked at the outlet profile of County Ditch 28. And Crystal here will talk a little bit more about that.